Thank you. You should be able to see my screen. Hello, Dimitri Hoekstra, product designer for Verified Continuous Integration. This UX showcase will be featuring the Dag Pipeline Visualization. It will basically be a showdown of what has happened before and where we are now, where we're heading, and hopefully it will be, the beginning of many improvements towards our pipeline visualization model. Let me start off with a little view on the team. Lots of these slides in this presentation are more for viewing purposes afterwards, so I'll probably going through a lot of these slides pretty quickly, but it's kind of nice to point out the team. If you're interested, I have a little arrow where I'm in within this blurb of information, but feel free to check it out. There's lots of people involved in this apart from me. And then before I begin, I want to head out and give a little bit of an explanation on what a DAG is, what a DAG pipeline visualization will be, and why it kind of matters. So within our continuous integration, we currently feature a stage-based model. I'll go into that in a minute. But the DAG basically stands for Directed Acyclic Graph. And that's basically an idea that something cannot cycle around, but it has a direction, so to say. And the gist of it is that every job can depend on any other job. So there's a lot of flexibility. And we're going to illustrate that by showcasing the stage-based approach as well in the next slide, where you can see a little, very small, very minimal illustration, which kind of showcases where all jobs always depend on all jobs of the previous stage. And the idea with this is that it, creates a clear separation, but it limits flexibility, as in that if you, for example, one of the jobs in the first stage is already done, still all other jobs depend on all other jobs being finished as well. So this can create unnecessary bottlenecks. That if we skip back to the previous slide real quickly, we can see that, for example, a job in the future will already be able to begin if all of its dependencies already successfully succeeded. So kind of circumventing that potential bottleneck problem. Going on, a little bit of the timeline, what has happened. In 12.2, we have done an implementation within GitLab that kind of allows for this DAG to already happen in the background. The visualization has not kept up with that though. So we have done a visualization problem validation, like, hey, what are the issues the current user is facing? Is it necessary for us to dive into this? And it is. I can give you that. And after that, we've done an ideation phase on that, and the current phase in 12.10 is just starting right now, is going on into the technical ideation. That's together with front end, because this is heavily impacting, the visualization model of the pipeline. There's a lot of things going on, and there are also some concepts to be tested out and hopefully internally validated as well. 13.0, there will hopefully be the implementation. The last time I showed this graph in a different video, we had a different milestone assigned to this, but we'll be getting to that soon. Let me see. So the MVC solution, which was proposed in 12.2, a little short back is here. It already has an effect on our visualization, that it can mean that even though our current pipeline visualization only features stage-based pipelines, it basically means that multiple jobs in different stages will already begin running regardless of the stage-based visualization model. So it doesn't really feature or visualize well what's actually happening. It's kind of blurs our vision on the pipeline itself. So we set out to do research. We wanted to understand how we want to visually bridge that gap between the different pipeline models, and how we can potentially approach the hybrid DAG model, where we both have jobs that depend on a stage-based approach, but also jobs that depend fully on a DAG-based approach, and basically avoid confusion, in that situation. So the hypothesis is that we're currently confusing users. pipeline is not sufficient in terms of like being able to troubleshoot failures, being able to see what is going on. And, you know, that we have the idea that we actually can showcase all the different pipeline models within one pipeline model and don't need to have multiple to showcase that. Going on, we have a few different personas we need to take into mind. We have the DevOps engineer persona, which is our implementer persona. Those will, you know, basically be troubleshooting the pipeline itself, while the user personas are mostly interesting, you know, hey, where's my pipeline going wrong and what has it for an effect towards the future of my pipeline, etc. Going on, and I think there's some highlights to point out. The order of the jobs is most important to know. The dependencies should be made visible. This is currently impossible in the current pipeline visualization. You know, you see pipelines are starting at the same time as jobs in other stages. That's the only way to kind of know that, you know, a job is a DAG job instead of a stage-based job. So we're currently not providing the necessary information towards the user. Both the status and the progress are important. This is kind of interesting, but it's less important for the DAG-based approach for now, but an important point regardless for the future. Let me see, the current workaround, I think it's kind of interesting. Now, if you want to find out if a job blocks other jobs, yes or no, you have to rely on scanning logs, reviewing execution time, etc. It's a very convoluted way to find out these kind of dependency lines when we're not showing them. And lastly, logical groupings of jobs makes more sense in DAGs. I think that one is also very interesting. With our stage-based approach, we have manually inserted these kind of models, but then we are limiting ourselves and creating unnecessary bottlenecks. With DAGs, we have lots of opportunities there to group jobs together based on generations of execution, for example, or in other ways, which potentially make up future pipeline visualization models. But let's not dive too deep there right now. So we need to support both stage-based, pure DAG, and the hybrid model. I think it's kind of interesting to point out the last point here that we do not support this yet, but we can think about this in the future, and it's kind of ideal if the stage or if the pipeline model already would support this, is that, for example, if DAG jobs, so jobs that can depend on any other job, can depend on stages itself. So even, so that would mean that a job does not depend on all the jobs within that stage. In a way it will, but then we can link within our GitLab YAML directly to the stage itself instead of naming each job independently, kind of cleaning up the GitLab CI YAML in a way. Potential future material though. I'm going over this quickly because we'll not be touching all of these visualizations in the MVC, which is going to be most important there, but the pipeline model will have an effect on both the pipeline graph as well as the mini pipeline graph, which is showcased in multiple views. There's loads of information we're gonna need to present. The MVC will dial it down a little. Let me see. And this is, I think, a very interesting slide to go to though. What is the characteristics we're looking for, right? The dependency line should have a clear and expected structure. And that is a kind of thing with the DAG jobs or with the DAG pipeline visualization, a pipeline can grow very quickly, and become very blurry. It's very hard to read. But it's one of the, I think, key characteristics we need to keep in mind when wanting to showcase our pipeline. In GitLab, we have a pretty huge pipeline, but at the same time, it should make sense for smaller ones and perhaps even bigger ones. And especially with those huge graphs, it should be easy to read, to quickly find out, how to troubleshoot your pipeline. There's a clear direction, kind of referencing back to the DAG, directed acyclic graph. So the direction should be clear from the graph itself, lowering that cognitive load at the same time. Status and ID should be visible, of course, accessibility, and of course the dependency of a job should be most clear in a pipeline which showcases the DAG pipeline, be it a hybrid or not. Let me see, it should be interactable as well. And then we're kind of going to the next things. Mini pipeline graph I'm gonna skip because this is not gonna be part of the MVC, but we're kind of getting into the Dag visualizations here. These are some models of the internet. You can quickly see how some jobs are all getting together. And I wanna point out here a little bit in the next slide. And let me see, so I'm gonna come back here to logical groupings. So stage-based grouping is limiting to DAGs because they're kind of creating these bottlenecks. And one of the things that always is true, even in a hybrid model or a DAG-based approach or stage-based approach, is kind of this execution order discovery, the order of execution. And it kind of creates these generations. So I'm going here quickly through these a bit. I think I need to hurry up my my presentation a little, but regardless of that, I think it's interesting to show that in both these graphs, it's kind of interesting to see that we can group them logically by execution. So for example, this job depends on one generation before that, and the next one depends on at least 2 prior generations of execution. It's a little bit of a hard concept to grasp, but eventually every graph can kind of be cut down in these kind of execution generations, and in that way it makes sense to visualize them. So to go on, there's been some ideation done by me, like how I'm going to showcase this, what kind of things do we have here, and let me see. There's lots of things we can show. There's lots of information to show. How we're going to keep it sane. Playing around with that is very important. And when you're gonna play around with bigger models, in that case, it's gonna be time intensive to create these models and find out if your structure is gonna work. So it's kind of like going into the next slide. There's the need to iterate and prototype faster. So I found this. This is one of a multitude of tools these days available where we can play around with code and procedurally generate these kind of graphs. So taking this along, these are some examples found on the internet, created in Observable. And eventually I found these to be kind of the right direction in terms of what I was looking for. It has a clear direction, and it kind of points out, similar to a metro map, which jobs are more important because they have other jobs depend on them. If those jobs fail, you immediately know, like, hey, these are very important for future jobs to succeed faster or succeed more often, for example. Going on, these kind of like adjusting the graph, played around with it, and created this kind of generations, which makes sense for our use case. The script's
about 2 minutes
breaking.
left.
2 minutes left. That makes sense. Almost at the end though. So let's skip ahead. Here we see a little bit of a simpler model that represents the same data, but the script is failing. So let's get ahead, and then I'm gonna show you some things here. So there's a proposal of like how we can showcase some of the elements within the feature. What we're gonna do here is, in the MVC scope, we're gonna create a Dag Pipeline Tab, which is gonna showcase just the Dag pipeline. This way we're gonna alleviate any risk towards altering the current pipeline visualization, slowly make this better over time. It's gonna focus solely on the Dag visualization, but it will feature any, so both stage-based as well as Dag jobs. And then I can kind of showcase what is up next. So currently we're busy with technical ideation. In 13.0, there will be implementation, and there's some need in terms of like what came out of the research for performance optimization, different logical groupings we have talked about before, and there's some other things, some other views we need to support in the future as well. And then we go to a little sneak peek of how this then would look. For example, in the left one, we see a simpler view where you can see, like, for example, that the jobs in the second stage depend on this one job in the first stage. And this is better visualized in the second view, where you can see those jobs kind of growing in size the more jobs depend on it. And this is kind of like the idea with the MVC approach. We're just going to show the ID information of the job, the status, and its dependency lines. And we'll be showing that aside of the normal pipeline graph, kind of giving us an option to alleviate risk, but also internally validate this and build upon from there. So these are the things we're busy with for the Dag visualization.